Hello and welcome. You're watching Newsx and I'm Megha Sharma. Dominique Pelicot, the French man who was accused of raping his wife Gisele Pelicot with 50 other men, has been found guilty of aggravated rape. A court pronounced its verdict on the Pelicot mass rape trial and also convicted Dominique for making and distributing pictures and videos of his former wife. Pelicot, who is 72 years of age, has admitted to drugging his ex-wife Gisele and hiring strangers online to rape her. He has been given a maximum sentence of 20 years in prison. All the 51 convicted have been sentenced to 3 to 20 years of imprisonment. I'm going to start my conversation. Joining me on the telecast is Brinda Adige. Brinda, I want to get your response on this. Heinous crimes such as this, rarest of the rare crimes that one may have witnessed in the entirety of one's lifetime, took place in France. It happened to this woman for a period of 9 years, and she was raped over 200 times by her husband repeatedly, and then strangers that were summoned by her husband, and she was in a drugged state. She was sedated and taking advantage of her precarious situation. Rapes were performed on her body. In a situation such as this, where capital punishment is not an option, it has been abolished by law in the courts in France. Do you think there is today a need for amendment of laws in countries? For example, the case that has happened in France, when a crime of such brutality and depravity happens.
There is a need to review and amend the laws. That said, we must also accept that all justice systems across the world, no matter how developed the countries might be, are patriarchal in nature. Now, that said, even if you look at this particular case that we are talking about, different rapists have got different kinds of punishment. Some have got only 2 years, some have got 4 years, some have got 5 years, which means the crime rape, this is a crime that was done by them knowingly. They know that she is drugged, and so there is no consent. They may have paid that man money, the husband money. The husband himself is getting only 20 years. So even before amending, which might take a long time, like all laws, the judge has the power to give lifetime, rigorous, solitary confinements. Now, why hasn't the judge looked at these issues? I don't know.
Right. Okay. So how do we... I'm going to come back to you, Brinda. I have with me Leher Sethi, who's a women rights activist herself. Leher, again, your opinion. Now, when Nirbhaya happened and the country, the world was shuddered when that heinous crime took place, and the brutality that was exposed of these men who committed this crime on this little girl, that forced our judiciary to review the laws, make amendments, to make punishments severe and stricter, to set an example for people, for society, that such acts will not be tolerated and will be and the culprits, the perpetrators will be brought to book, and with the most exemplary punishment that there possibly is. Do you think there at this point of time, there is it's a trial court where the case of Gisele Pelicot was being heard? Could there be a chance that she goes to the higher courts and appeals her case to demand for more stringent punishment be meted out to these culprits, including her ex-husband?
Thank you for that question, Megha. I think firstly, there is no comparison between India and the laws in Europe, because had a similar case happened in India, marital rape is not even considered illegal. It does not, there's an exception in our rape law that gives the right to a man to rape his own wife. If a woman decides to file a case against her husband, she has to file it under domestic violence. So marital rape is not even made, it's not even criminalized in our country. So there is no comparison between what they are doing between India and France. Also, let me tell you, since you picked up the case, the Nirbhaya case, I followed that very closely. I know the parents still in touch. Just on the 16th, they had done a program that I was a part of. It took 6 years. It took our courts 6 long years for a case of that magnitude that got the kind of international coverage that the Nirbhaya case. It shook the very foundations of our society. Despite that, it took 6 years. In this case, this is a very recent case. The moment that the case was brought in by this woman, within a few months, we have seen it reach a verdict, which is what law enforcement agencies and the judiciary needs to do. I feel that this is something that can serve as an example for countries like India. Firstly, we need to make stringent laws against marital rape. Rape should not have an exception whether a woman, is married or unmarried. The law should be the same. Also, I feel that we need to include people of the third gender and men should also be protected under the rape law. As of now, I think that's what I'd like to say.
Okay, all right. I'm being joined by Marina Yaloyan. She is a journalist from France. Thanks, Marina, for joining me on the telecast. And the kind of attention the Gisele Pelicot mass rape case garnered across the world, rarest of the rare crime. Perhaps in your lifetime or mine, such an incident one could not even dare to even think or imagine that such a act of depravity could have been committed by an individual. This has come to surface. At this point, are there discussions being held about the severity of the punishment that has been announced by the court, which is 20 years, which is the maximum sentencing of 20 years that has been given to the ex-husband?
Yeah, of course. I think that many activists, especially feminist activists, are questioning the severity of the sentence. They consider that 20 years in prison, which is the maximum sentence, isn't enough. And, as you know, 50 accomplices of the husband received only sentences ranging from 3 to 15 years, which is by some considered as insufficient. So, yeah, of course, I think that this trial questions the legal system in France, and also, I think that there is a potential legal reform that's being considered because the adequacy of French rape laws, particularly concerning consent and the definition of sexual assault, may prompt calls for legislative reforms and legislative action.
Right, absolutely. Mm-hmm. Are there also voices garnering support that perhaps there is a need for change in laws or amendments being made where death penalty right now in France is abolished?
Yeah, the death penalty is abolished, of course, absolutely. And also, for example, compared to the US system where you can accumulate crimes, which means that when you go on trial, you can have accumulation of crimes that can, sometimes it even goes over a life sentence. Some people in the US can receive over 150 or 200-year sentence. This does not exist in France. In France, you really go by maximum, which means that 20 years in this case is the maximum penalty that you can possibly have. Yes.
Okay.
And
yeah, go ahead. Okay. Also wanted to understand, now the courts have passed the order. They also have given a chance for the defendants to appeal in the higher courts, a window of 10 days. Now, are all the 51 of these culprits, along with the husband, are going to file for an appeal in the higher court? What is the latest information with regards to this?
Well, of course, there is the possibility of appeal. That's the case in any court. I'm not a lawyer, unfortunately, so I'm not very familiar with the intricacies of the French law and how it works. But yes, I assume that all defendants have a right to appeal, and so now they are exercising this right. Now, whether this appeal will be taken into consideration or not is a question for the French court, and we'll see how this will.
Yeah. What is the sentiment of people, or what is the sentiment of the French after this case unveiled? It was a 3-month-long trial, after which the sentencing happened yesterday. What has been the reaction of the people of France, especially keeping in mind that it was very brave and courageous of Gisele to have an open court hearing? She said that I would not want to hide my identity because I want to swap the blame to the other side.
Yeah, absolutely. It's true. I mean, she did have a right to have the trial behind closed doors as any rape victim, yet she desired to step forward and to have a public trial for people to, I think, to serve as a model, as an example. And she kind of became, I would say, a feminist icon in France at this point. Also, her public stance, I think, has encouraged other survivors to come forward and fostered a more supportive environment for victims of sexual abuse.
Yeah, do you think at this point of time there are people who are advocating that there should be more stringent laws when it comes to sexual abuse?
Yes, definitely. Of course, the feminist organizations, human rights activists, there are certain groups of people who definitely advocate for that. On the other hand, I would like to say that, for example, some journalists, especially abroad, wrote that France woke up to a toxic rape culture. Personally, I think it's a very dangerous statement. It's dangerous because it stigmatizes men. It portrays them as predators. And I think it's very important not to generalize things and not to stigmatize genders. So rape happens, it's terrible. It has to, but we have to be careful with that kind of stigma in the society. So I think that's another problem with this case is, on one hand, of course, there needs to be justice, and I think it questions a lot of a lot of laws, and it can put all of that into question. But I think the other danger is falling into this kind of trap where you see men as predators and you just stigmatize men in general. Yes.
Absolutely. So, you make a very interesting point over there. Stay on with me, Marina. Let me get in my other panelists into the discussion. Dr. Kapil Kakkar, this obviously brings me back, what Marina said brings me back to the incident that has happened very recently in our country. This is the case of Atul Subhash. Now, these are two, extreme cases in the spectrum of marital violence that individuals have faced. One is a man over here who was forced to commit suicide because of the mental stress, the extortion that the family of the wife was, extortion that was being committed by them, and several other of those mental and physical harassment that he faced at the hands of the wife and the family. And on the other, this disgraceful, heinous crime that has happened, which is unfathomable. It's unthinkable that such a thing could have appeared in a person's mind, and he even, fantasized about it, but also executed it to the level that it continued for 9 long years. And that's not an insignificant number of years.
See, for me, this is much beyond marital rape, because the husband did what normally, see, when you talk about marital rape, you would see another thing. In India, if I say, there is a lot of misuse of laws. Secondly, cases would go on for decades, or for 4, 5, 6, 7 years at least, where the victim can be a woman or a man. What happened in this Subhash case? Now, he fought for justice and he could not somewhere fathom that he's going to get justice, is why he committed suicide. It is, yes, if you would have, and secondly, it is not easy to prove marital rape in courts. In this case, it is a very different case in the sense, in this case, this guy, what he did, it's a learned behavior. This guy seems to be watching such people. I'll give you the psychological side of it. Such people would normally watch a lot of porns. They would have a lot of fantasies which they would want to self-regulate and convert it into their goals. Such people would see women as objects. They would see victims as so these people would see victims as deserving of victimization. They would have cognitive distortion, which means they would justify, they would misinterpret the cues, and these people, and they would have inaccurate what do you call inaccurate reality. Such people would have low self-esteem. They want to feel in control because they have low self-esteem, and that is the reason there is a dominance of power. And most important thing, because what your team had sent me, now this guy, what I read was he used to photograph and videograph the woman with small skirts, etc. So now this is a sexually coercive person. Such people would basically manipulate, trick, because they are obsessed with such kind of thing. And that is why you would find not only the husband, but more than 49, 50 people are involved in this.
Yeah.
Because this guy, but what actually intrigues me is, though this, I would salute this lady because she came out and she went for an open public trial. But again, what made her not say this for 9 long years? And it is basically this guy was sexually coercive her. And that was the reason, because these people are so manipulative, they will not let somebody come out. And let me tell you, in India also, you will see a lot of cases like this, wherein people, family members would indulge in such acts, but because the victim would not want to say this.
Because it's
why
victim
they would
shaming.
normally be
It's
quiet.
unfortunately victim shaming. It is the woman who's blamed. It's at the end of the day the so-called reputation of the family needs to be safeguarded in society, no matter what, even if it is at the expense of the mental torture, the sexual abuse a woman faces at the hands of a man. It could be her uncle, it could be a nephew, it could be anybody within your family. And therefore, Brinda, an example such as this that has been set, it is unprecedented, because Gisele went on and said that, listen, I will not hide myself. I will not, go about be falling into the trap of victim shaming. I want that my name be published and splattered all across all media across the globe. I want my face to be in front of the cameras so that I can say it with conviction that I was the victim. I faced it all, and there is no reason for a person who has gone through this torture over a span of such a long time to be shamed, to be victimized, but not the other party who has been actually indulging in it.
Yeah. On one hand, you see Gisele defying the sexist, misogynistic, patriarchal institutions and the society. But on the other hand, we also see that the court also is protecting the rapists. Their names and their photos are not out. A couple of them have come out as sketches because of somebody sitting in the court and putting it out. But their names are not out yet. And that also goes to show that the courts are not looking at it in a way to say, these are the fellows, we need to name them and shame them. Now, one of the panelists, I think Dr. Kapoor, asked, why did she have to wait for 9 long years? Please understand, it is very difficult for women to come out and speak because they have lost their self-esteem. They have lost their self-worth. They have lost anything called confidence in themselves. And then they have to build this confidence in somebody else. And we don't even know how that somebody else is going to look at the woman coming out to say, because the first thing is disbelief. The next is the next question, why did you not tell me immediately? We don't really know what she was going through in that house. We don't really know what she had to suffer. So all of that said and done, the fact that she's come out today, it is important that all people, all kinds of experts, therapists, activists are there to support and help her. And I think, like the journalist pointed out, she's an icon of feminism. She's an icon who has gone out to say, I'm breaking the silence that patriarchy has built around rape and sexual assault for eons.
Yeah.
And that is what we need to bring back into our society and our country.
Right, absolutely. Leher Sethi, let's hear it from you as well in terms of, you know, an example that has been set. Do you think that will make Indian women more courageous in putting out their cases, whether it is domestic abuse, sexual harassment, rapes, gang rapes, mass rapes that happen, but women shy away from reporting it simply because they are too ashamed, because they feel that they are going to be victimized and nobody will listen to them, and they are going to be questioned about what time did you go out and why did you go out at that particular point of time and why were you dressed that way, maybe you were asking for it, and so on and so forth.
Well, I hope it encourages women to come out. I hope that it serves as an example to many other women. But I remain a little skeptical because we have seen this in the past. And like you said, the burden of proof, unfortunately, falls on the woman. You know, there is, if you were to take the cases of the most famous rape cases in India, let's take Nirbhaya, for example, or Bhavari Devi, or you know, the RG car medical case, for example. Most of these cases are committed, you know, these rapes have been committed by men who are not related to the woman. The woman is seen as someone who's somebody who's accepted by society, someone who's educated, you know, comes from a decent background, etc., etc. So we have this habit of of popularizing cases and reacting to cases where, you know, where we are like, we call these perpetrators, the convicts, monsters, you know, we have this. But the moment that the perpetrator, the person who's committing the crime, the person who's committing the rape is related to the woman, is well known to the woman, we immediately start doubting the woman. Why did she not speak up before? Look at the result of the Me Too movement in India, for example. You know, it is the women who have suffered. It is them who have lost jobs. It is them who have lost face. They are not getting work anymore, the ones who have come forward. They are being shamed publicly on social media. They are being trolled. Whereas the men have, I mean, for a while, some of them lost their jobs. Maybe, you know, they were removed from whatever posts they were holding, and then everything is back to normal. Their lives have gone on like as if nothing happened.
Okay, so, but then of course there were other cases also, you know, then women, maybe a minuscule of them, handful of them, they did take advantage of that and then went about,
that will always be there,
yeah,
right?
wrongfully accusing the men of sexual abuse or sexual harassment. Yes, absolutely, you're absolutely right. Yes, coming back to you, Marina, now a situation such as this, as was pointed out by Brinda, you know, the names and the identities of these individuals, the culprits who have been sentenced, has been withdrawn at this point of time. It has been kept hidden. Do you think it is need for the public to know who these perpetrators are?
Well, you know, it's a little bit, it's a delicate question, because I think that the victims have a right to privacy. So weirdly enough, even though I feel it's completely, you can say it's unfair, it's you know, it's not normal, but the victims as well have a right to say whether I want my name in the paper or not. So in the case of Gisele Pelicot, she chose to reveal her identity and to have a public trial. In the case of the perpetrators, they may decide, and they have a right to decide, not to disclose their photos and identities. So in this case, I think this is what happened. I mean, we do know the name of the main perpetrator, who is Dominique Pelicot, her husband. It's true that his photo hasn't been splashed all over front page like Gisele's, but again, it's a French law of privacy, and you cannot violate this law, even though it might seem unfair in this particular case because, again, I think that the community has a right to see these people, to know who they are, and to know to see their faces, and yeah.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Marina, for joining me, and I thank the rest of my guests also for speaking up on this subject. On that note, I slip into a short break. Thanks for watching Newsx.